This is SoundNotion, the weekly podcast for new music and music news. I'm Patrick Gulo.
I'm Sam Merciers.
I'm Dave McDonald.
And I'm Nate Blyton.
And we're very lucky this week on SoundNotion to have a guest. Carrie Andrew from the UK is with us. She is a composer, performer, and writer. Welcome to the show, Carrie.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Well, to start off, I was going to introduce you and go through some of the things you're into as a composer and performer, but the list is just too huge. So why don't you tell us about some of the mini projects and creative things that you're involved in these days?
Oh, wow. Yeah, sure. Well, as a composer, I mostly specialize in vocal and choral composition. And I started out as being classically trained, but I've started diverging and following lots of different paths, bit of a jack of all trades. So I dabble in experimental jazz, in traditional folk music, electronica, a bit of a mixture. I perform with an a cappella trio called Juice. I perform with a couple of jazz groups called Metamorphic and Dolly Man, and my solo project is called You Are Wolf, and that's exploring traditional folk and loop station and electronica and bits and bobs. And I do a bit of writing as well, so I keep my own creative blog and a football blog, and yeah, just done my first Guardian piece as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of different stuff. How did you get involved in all this? First of all, those different kinds of music. I mean, you said so you went to school for composition, right?
Well, yeah. Well, I did a general music degree, but it was very much classically, being classically trained up at York University, Old York rather than New York. And yeah, and I specialised in composition for quite a while. But I just ended up doing a lot of singing. I'm not a trained singer, but I really enjoyed doing experimental vocal music, a bit more than some of the trained singers who thought they might damage their voices or something. I don't know.
Right.
So got together with the like-minded singers up at York, with Sarah and Anna, who sing with me in Juice. And so and I just got really interested in stuff like Meredith Monk, particularly Monk, Berrios, Anarchis' vocal music. And we just had some great lecturers at York, so I was introduced to a lot of world music and folk and the rest of it. And I mean, most of the things I'm interested, whether it's jazz or folk or electronica, always uses the voice in some way. Yeah. So that's definitely my big thing. That there's, even though I'm involved in all of these different projects, the voice, whether it's sung or sometimes spoken word, is always a link in there, I guess. Yeah.
That combination of folk and electronic music that you say you combine, how did you come to that?
I guess I wanted to start doing a bit of solo singing. And what do people do if they don't have a band? They get a loop station.
Yeah, right.
And they start practicing in their bedrooms. And yeah, I just wanted to play around. Actually, I don't even think I started with traditional folk. I think I was just doing some songwriting, okay. Some sort of slightly left field pop songwriting. But I've always been interested in mythology and folklore, and that fed into a lot of my early, more avant-garde writing. And so I guess I was just sort of looking to the more traditional song as well, and yeah, just playing around with loop station. And I mean, it's mostly loop station. I'm just getting a bit more into actually using the old laptop and software and stuff.
I mean, even doing any kind of layering with that kind of music can be, you're treading new ground. I think that it's a nice exploration.
Well, what I say about this, or what I like about doing this, is that the only problem with using a loop station, I mean, anybody can do it. It's just an easy toy. Anyone can stack a load of layers of loops. It's just dead simple. But what I like about folk songs is that they all have narrative. They have lovely stories attached to them. So it's finding a way. You've got something lovely and linear to go with, rather than just check out my riffs. Oh, here's some more riffs, etc.
Yeah.
There's something tying it all together, I guess. yeah.
So what kind of venues do you play this kind of music in? It seems like it's kind of got a lot of things that you would expect to see in a concert hall, but then a lot more things that you would expect to see in much more casual venues.
Yeah. I sort of appear all over as a composer and performer. With You Are Wolf, with the folk stuff, it's folk clubs and festivals and places that are interested in pop music, but in a very broad sense, experimental stuff. With Juice, we perform sometimes in more casual venues, but often in more formal classical venues, like Wigmore Hall, which is London's beautiful chamber music venue, and stuff like that. And yeah, with the jazz groups, I mostly just sing in rather than write for jazz venues too. So yeah, I dip my toe into all of those waters, I guess.
Just out of curiosity, Carrie, did you study with William Brooks or have any contact with him?
Yeah. He was just starting just as I was leaving, actually, but mostly with Juice, with the trio, we've had a lot of connections with York. We go up and teach there. We're an ensemble in residence there at the moment, so we have a lot to do with Bill.
Awesome.
He's a great guy. You know him then, do you, or know his?
Well, he's friends with the guy I studied with for my master's degree, Chris Schultes, at the University of New Mexico, and one year he was one of the featured composers at the symposium they have. And I had to stage a piece of his, and I still have the score, but I can't remember the name. But it was like 4 people playing a series of different musical fragments that are supposed to take the form of a conversation. So I was in charge of putting that together, and it was a great experience working with him on that.
Really nice. The one thing I know about Bill. Oh, sorry.
Go
I was
ahead.
just going to say the one thing I know about Bill Brooks is that he's obviously essentially immersed in contemporary classical music, but he's obsessed. He used to collect all the number ones. I don't know if this is the Billboard, over in America or in the UK. Yeah. He collects every number one, chart hit in the pop chart. This is like his little, he catalogs them. It's really nice.
That's pretty cool.
That's an interesting project.
I don't think I know anybody who does that. That's great.
Well, you may have certain feelings about the pop music industry, but they're the number one for a reason. Something's got to be going on there.
Absolutely. It's important to know.
So
Carrie? Oh, go ahead, Patrick.
I just want to say I was happy to hear that there are so many different venues that you're performing in, because I think, over here in the States, sometimes there's an idea that, new music has its place in certain venues, and it's difficult for it to get into larger concert halls or something. And I like that you've been able to get into, Wigmore Hall and a number of other places, and that you've really spread yourself over a wide area.
Well, it might be quite interesting to talk about the scene a little bit in London. Not just me, but
yes.
a lot of my contemporaries, particularly in London, but certainly in other areas of the UK as well, are a bit like me and have started out as classical composers, classical musicians, but have started, making forays into other genres and often combining all of those things together. Mm-hmm. I'm involved with a club night, which is also a label called Non-Classical, which maybe we'll be hearing from later. And Non-Classical is run by Gabriel Prokofiev. And it's a club night, a monthly club night, but sometimes bigger events as well as a label putting out interesting contemporary music. Simple as that, really. And what's been really successful about that over the last however many years, it's been maybe 5 years or so, is that they're trying to find ways to put contemporary music, often quite uncompromising contemporary music, into the more casual spaces, into little sort of grungy bars or clubs in Shoreditch, which is the trendiest bit of East London, and that sort of thing. So that's quite a big thing in London at the moment. Actually, no, it's not a big thing. It's a big thing for me. It's a certain scene that I hope. I'm sure there are lots of things going on like this in some places in America too, but it's just interesting keeping track of that, really, and how there's often an article about non-classical or a similar venture, which they always write it like it's never been done before. A piece of classical music in a club, and what's that like to have a drink in your hand and be able to whisper and the person's ear next to you and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, it is very new though, and also there are a lot of people doing it, but in such wide and varied circles that I think it's like new in a bunch of different places all at the same time, and I think that's
I'm actually curious about what I'm curious about. On the show, we've talked a great deal about that a new music kind of movement that's very much like what you're describing, but we will bellyache sometimes about how people, when they talk about it, they talk about New York as if it's the only place that kind of thing is going on, and certainly a lot of it is going on. Do you find that a sort of, I guess maybe a London-centric view of what's going on in that music scene near you?
Possibly, yeah. It's a bit difficult to answer that because I'm really London-centric.
So you're one of those.
No, not entirely. I'm fairly sure. In fact, I know that the second and third cities, Birmingham and Manchester, there'll certainly be things going on like that. Certainly in other cities, in Glasgow and Edinburgh and Bristol, there's again trying to find ways to put contemporary or less contemporary classical music in much more relaxed spaces. It happens more in London, or it's all tried out first there. It's the testing ground, maybe.
Yeah,
but yes, I'm sure you're right. It shouldn't be a London-centric thing or a New York-centric thing that we should talk about.
It's just interesting that it's so easy for people to connect these days, and a lot of what makes new music new to me, and it's going to be evidenced, I think, by the pick of the week that you suggested, is not just new noises, but new ways of collaborating and new ways of sharing content in music. So it's really interesting to hear about the scene there, because a big project of what we've done on the show is trying to figure out what is the new music scene, and there's no reason why we can't start making connections with things going on, in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. You're right. Nowadays, definitely, there's no reason. Everything's online, so there should be. There's so much potential for lots of streaming of gigs or Skype performances where you're I'm sure that must happen, improvising over Skype and stuff like that.
Oh, that would be really tricky with the delay. I'm sure you could do it. You'd have to be very pulse-free, free-flowing kind of thing. I don't know how you do anything that has a beat over Skype. But that would be fun.
You'd have to have one person doing the beat and everybody else doing non-pulsing texture work.
Right.
There's a working model.
There you go. It was really tempting when Ken Ueno was on the show, actually, Dave, to try and get him to do some sort of impromptu performance that we would record.
Yeah.
So, Carrie, the reason, other than the fact that you're a very interesting composer and performer, we actually came to know about you because of the Guardian article you mentioned earlier. I had heard a story on NPR, National Public Radio here in the States, about how a very small percentage of people who are applying for the commissions offered by PBS, which is the public broadcasting system here in the United States, were women. And right after that, I found your Guardian article. I'm like, well, this is something we need to talk about. And I don't know if you know much about what's going on in the States, but there's women and women's rights has been very much in the news, and we didn't want to end up talking about this issue without having a female composer on the show. So in your Guardian article, it's entitled, Why Are There So Few Female Composers? So for the listeners out there that didn't get a chance to read the article yet, could you just summarize sort of what you say in this article for us?
No problem. Yeah, I was asked by the Guardian's comment is free to write this little article, just an opinion piece, but it starts with some statistics. So a bit like you with the PBS, we've got an organisation, the PRS for Music Foundation, which is like a funding body that funds lots of great opportunities, but it also is the place where composers and songwriters register to get royalties, basically. And the PRS found out that only 14% of their PRS members, those people registering for their royalties, were female. And there have been lots of other stats. The one that often that comes up in the UK is when the proms, the BBC proms, the big summer concerts come up. How many new commissions are for women and how many aren't, and it's always talked about. So it started with a stat, and my opinion, I work quite a lot in music education, and you often see once you start working with teenagers and sort of 15, 16-year-olds, you start to see more boys coming through, boys being more interested in composition than girls. You know, that's definitely been my experience. And so I just was saying in this article that I feel that a lot of it must just be down to education, to not having enough examples of female creators of music. You know, females being the writers of music in any genre, not just talking about classical music. Not just the girls on stage singing or playing an instrument, but creating music. So that was basically the thrust, that I thought there should be more role models, both in schools, and I know that means that's down to teachers and people who write we have the national curriculum, who write national music plans, if there are them, or just individual teachers. I think it should come from there, and also I guess it's just promoting those that are doing lots, and there are loads of my friends are brilliant composers who happen to be ladies, and promoting a bit of them, I think would help girls just be able to imagine themselves in that position. So there we go. That's probably a longer word count.
No, that's great.
No.
I think there's an interesting thing that you point out in there, that it's not as though there are people that are programming for large orchestras or running composition competitions or something that say, oh, this is by a female composer, we'll just throw it in the trash. It's much more systemic than that. Almost it's part of the way we teach kids about music. Like you said, it's got a lot to do with education.
Well, I think so.
When I read the article, I appreciated the fact that it was very no nonsense. A lot of times when you read something someone's written about an inequality like this, their conclusion is, and we need to do something, and that's kind of where they end, And I appreciated the fact that you laid it out very plain. These are the statistics, and the way to fix it is painfully obvious. You just have to have, the education system needs to encourage female composers. It
certainly seems painfully obvious to me. I mean, yeah. Like I say, I don't know what it's like anywhere else. I'm really just talking about the UK. I really don't know, don't have an experience of music education in your country or anywhere else. But
no, we have these same discussions in the US.
Yes.
I'm sure.
I mean, out of probably 50 undergraduate and graduate composers I came in contact with at my most recent university, maybe 10%. What do you think, guys? Were female?
Probably less. But yeah. I mean,
there's so few I can name them all off the top of my head, and I've never even had the chance to study, not including masterclass kinds of things, but never even had the opportunity to study with a female composer.
Right.
And that's at 3 different schools.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's definitely something that goes on everywhere, and like you said, not even having the opportunity. And I remember, in fact, we were in a composers symposium class where the guy leading the class said, "Why aren't there any women here?" And there's like all men in the room. Well, why are you asking us?
Speaking of women,
go ahead, Patrick.
Speaking of women composers, I did see Missy Mazzoli's new opera last night.
Oh yeah?
Really cool.
How was it?
It was good. It's Song from the Uproar, the lives and deaths of Isabel Eberhardt. It was really interesting. It was a great production.
What was the orchestration?
It was the Now Ensemble.
Oh, cool.
Okay. Yeah, very nice.
So that's another cool thing that Carrie, I think you do, is the kind of band thing that is it's such an interesting idea of taking the way pop music works and writing completely different kinds of music for it.
Well, for me, that's just influenced by Bang on a Can stuff, really.
Right, exactly.
Bang on a Can All-Stars. It was seeing that like 10 years ago when I first saw that. It's a bit of a revelation, really. Just being able to combine electric guitars and bass guitars with the sort of writing I was doing anyway. I mean, it makes sense to me. To be honest, I listen to more pop music and everything else other than classical music than I do classical, so it makes sense for me to write for that instrumentation, I think.
Sam can relate to that.
Most people most people in music programs who don't lie do the same. So Carrie, there was something I was wanting to ask you about. First of all, I love this phrase. This is one of those, oh, look how the British say this. Positive prejudice. I think we would call that affirmative action in the United
Oh,
States.
okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But I like positive prejudice better. You mentioned these projects that are sort of advocacy projects for women. The Women Make Music scheme.
Yeah.
British Birds and Folklore. There, that has something to do with you, I think, also.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah. So I mentioned the PRS, who are the royalties people, but also do a lot of funding. And yeah, because they realised this statistic of 14% of their members being women, they decided to do something, positive prejudice, to do something positive about it, and put out an opportunity that was only for female writers. And so they've given, now let me think, I don't know, I think it's 25 different projects that go ahead. And not all of those are just one female creator. Some of them will be bands, I think, that have girls in them, I think. And I just applied for that with my You Are Wolf hat on, to do to write a new set of songs based on British birds and folklore, which is, I love birds. I love folklore. I've said that already, and so that was my new thing.
Well, I want to put it out to the audience. I don't know if there's anything equivalent or even like this in the United States, but hopefully there is someone out there who does, and if you do, let us know on the show. SoundNotion.tv/SN.
Right.
Or join the chat.
That's right.
Yes.
I do have one more question for you, Carrie, too.
Sure.
In your work of working kind of in the popular music world and coming from classical music world, have you ever worked with like straight up popular musicians that might not read music or be used to working in that chamber
about
group?
music that way?
I'm sure I must have. I'm trying to think. Mostly, to be honest, most of the musicians I work with are like me, who often come from either a classical tradition or a jazz tradition, which means mostly they read, and they read as well. So, no, but I guess, no, not really. I worked more with people who do improvise a lot, I suppose. And that's maybe a different way of working from some. But I think that's there are quite a lot of musicians, classical musicians, who do improvise in this country, who are very open and, not just sort of glued to the page of, must have my dots in front of me. And,
do you think that's something that's been changing lately, or like more people who are kind of crossover and
Well, I think it's both that, but I also think that a lot of musicians over here, professional musicians over here, are involved in education and educational projects. I do loads. I lead lots of fun projects for aforementioned Wigmore Hall and things like that. They all have brilliant education departments and take classical music or other music into schools, and you often take musicians in with you, and you devise work with the children, and the musicians have to be on their toes and making stuff as they go along. So at least with my experience and the people I know, it's probably a mixture of being interested in lots of these other genres, even as a classical musician, but also working in that sort of flexible educational environment too, I think.
Yeah, it must really stretch your ideas about different ways to make music and different ways of thinking about it too.
I think so. Yeah, it can be a lot of fun.
It's interesting to me that you work with people who most likely have some sort of classical music training, but are willing to improvise. My experience is that the percentage of people who are being trained in schools in the United States, they draw the line at improvisation. They're
scared by that freedom, I think.
Often unwilling to even give it a shot. And I always tell people, it's like, at the beginning at least, it's 80% willingness. You got to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a bit like my article, you can say that it goes for it. You need to address that at the root. It's when you're first learning violin, aged 8, that you need a fantastic teacher who says, okay, now we've learned that piece, but also I want to see what you can do with these 3 notes. Yeah. You can just play them however you like, It's just not fair. And of course, there are some great teachers, we call them peripatetic teachers, one-to-one instrumental teachers who do that. But again, I think there just should be more. It's getting out of the old traditional system and getting a bit of fun in there. And it's what an amazing skill to do. It's all about developing ear. Right. So I say, I'll write another article about that, I think.
I feel like it's a whole different kind of critical thinking about performance too, because you get to make those decisions about like, well, I don't like this, and I've got these ideas to fill that hole instead.
Yeah, you evaluate the product in a very different way. because you're not evaluating how closely you came to this imaginary ideal of perfect representation of the dots on the page.
But you're just making
like
music
how
that you
interesting
think-
this piece is as a work of art.
Right. I'm actually interested in the idea of if we were to get performing ensembles to start programming more music by female composers, it would also sort of obliquely help pull us out of the past, because we complain about orchestral programming a lot. It's all these dead white guys. Well, you're naturally going to start getting less dead white guys if you start trying to have more living women.
Yeah. It's a no-brainer.
I know it's good for everybody.
But I just think, I'm a commissioner as well. With Juice, we commission tons and tons of new music, and you just have to be aware of it. We commissioned this songbook of 10 little contemporary a cappella love songs in 2010, and so we knew we were going to do 10. We commissioned 5 women and 5 men. It's simple.
Easy.
And we thought about that. Was our decision first of all, and it wasn't like we were scratching around trying to find female composers. We actually had more female composers we wanted to commission than men. It's just you're right, it needs to come from commissioners too, ensembles or promoters or whoever's doing the commissioning, just to be aware of it. That's all, because there are female composers out there. There are enough to commission them. So it is a no-brainer.
Well, we've talked about this before. I think it's just a fear of ticket sales too.
Really?
Going out on a limb with
not that it's a woman necessarily, but that it's somebody people don't know.
Right.
Yeah, sure, of course.
Right.
Well, you either make a start or it's never going to happen.
My brain is just on fire with all kinds of questions about the dynamic between different stakeholders in the new music scene in the UK versus how that seems to work in the United States and in education too. It seems like it would be enough content for a whole new show. We talk all the time on the show about doing one that's just about music education.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah, we should.
So, do you guys know how the Detroit Symphony Orchestra is going to get in touch with their feminine side?
How's that sound?
What?
what?
They're going to have a show with Kid Rock.
That's getting in touch with their feminine side?
I'm being facetious.
That's a good link, though.
Yeah, did you like how I did that, Dave?
That was a good. I
Man.
had no idea where you were going with that.
And speaking of ticket sales for that, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a scheme to raise money for the DSO. Carrie, you'll have to take our apology. Because of where we're located and recent orchestral upheaval in regard to financing, we end up talking about the Detroit Symphony a lot.
Yeah, it's a bit of a local news show too.
Yeah.
We're very parochial.
So Dave, tell us about the Kid. You posted this article, so tell us about Kid Rock.
Well, Kid Rock is gonna do a benefit for the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. As I'm sure if you've listened to the show at all over the last year, you know that the Detroit Symphony Orchestra has had not a great time of it financially of late. And Kid Rock is trying to hold a benefit for them, and he will be joined by his band, the Twisted Brown Trucker Band.
Yeehaw!
Yeehaw! And the Detroit Symphony Orchestra playing orchestrations of
That's the best part.
Like they're doing Kid Rock music is what's happening.
I want to know who got paid to do the
arrangements,
orchestrations
yeah.
and how much they got paid.
I have no idea.
You know who I bet isn't conducting?
Who?
Slack.
You don't think Leonard's? I think Slacken is doing this.
Is he?
It's
Oh my God!
yeah.
Yeah. He participated.
He writes what Kid Rock is doing for Detroit is nothing short of amazing. I can think of very few contemporary musicians who believe wholeheartedly in their city.
There you go.
That was from Slacken?
Yeah.
Slatkin said that.
Nice. Well,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know,
good for him.
So
I mean, if he's conducting this, then rock on, Leonard.
Yeah.
right. And you know, I wouldn't call myself a Kid Rock fan, but I saw him on, I think, Austin City Limits, which, you know, is like emphasizes live performance. And he and his band, they put it down. You know, they know how to put on a good live show.
Cool.
Yeah. So the only catch here is that it's going to be pricey. It's going to be, I think the cheapest seat in the house is $100. And I get that it's a fundraiser, but $100 is a lot for something like this, I think.
Well, because Kid Rock is involved, you're probably going to get media outlets and all kinds of other stakeholders buying huge blocks of tickets and giving them away.
Sure.
Oh, yeah, it says DSO music director Len Slatkin will conduct, right there at the top.
Mm-hmm.
So that'd be interesting. I wonder if he'll be like bopping around on stage or something.
I just hope Kid Rock gets up in Slatkin's face and tries to get him to dance or something.
Like shredding the guitar to his back or something like that.
Yeah, doing the back-to-back thing.
All right, enough of that. Kickstarter is back in the news this week.
So we talked about this a little bit last week, but Kickstarter is going to be giving away, by their estimate, they're going to be supporting creative projects, as they call them, to the tune of about $150 million next year, which is more than the National Endowment of the Arts, which is a little embarrassing for the National Endowment for the Arts. But the NEA came back and they said, well, we're supporting, first of all, not all of that $150 million is for arts. Mm-hmm. There are things that Kickstarter calls creative projects that are not necessarily fine art, that are, like somebody's designed an interesting iPhone case or a T-shirt.
As the iPhone case makers get all up in arms. Like.
Hey, I think iPhone cases are pretty sweet. If somebody would design a sweet case for my Android phone and put it on Kickstarter, I'd buy 6 of them. Get on that Kickstarter.
Maybe one.
Or at least one. Anyway.
Carrie, I'm actually curious if you know about Kickstarter.
I don't. I haven't heard of it before.
I think it may not be available outside the U.S.
Well, I was going to explain what it is and see if there's something else like that she knows about.
Okay.
Kickstarter is a crowdsourcing funding platform. So you put a project out there and people can donate or fund it at different levels, and for those different levels, they get something back in return from you. Like they get the iPhone case, or if you're doing a piece, they get a copy of the score and a copy and a recording or whatever. Cool. Is there something like that?
Yeah, that's becoming a bit more of a big deal in the UK because we've got a conservative government at the moment. Who are slashing? Well, they're slashing everything. It's the same over there. We're having some money troubles, and but that includes the arts, and so everybody's taking a big funding cut. The Arts Council, new music organisations, everything. And so there are different crowdfunding bodies, but not ones quite. At least not the ones I've heard where you get something back if you donate, even if it's something small, which would make it more attractive, really.
Right.
Just you had a copy of that score because
the idea for this is that it's not necessarily charity, it's more a business proposition.
Yeah, sure.
And that you're funding the creation of a thing, and then you get the thing or some artifact of it.
Yeah, so like if you fund the development of a new iPhone case, then you're basically prepaying for an as yet uncompleted iPhone case.
Okay, yeah, I'm not aware of anything quite like that in the UK. Sounds good though.
Well, in the United States, it's just gotten a lot of media penetration. This one company has lately, so the funding across the board for that platform has taken off because of all the news it's made, and it's funded some projects way, way, way over their suggested amount.
Yeah, wow.
So it's easy to make big news stories about it, but it's a great platform.
Yeah. So anyway, they may not be supporting as much as they said they were compared to the NEA. And the other thing the NEA does is supports things that would have a harder time succeeding on Kickstarter, that are a little bit less commercial projects and
less product based.
Yeah, and some things that are happening locally in places where there's not a big audience. One of the things about Kickstarter is that it's on the web, so anybody can pledge to a Kickstarter project. But if you're if your project is about a live performance and you're not in a place that has a ton of people, then you have a big problem trying to get the world of the internet involved in this project that you have in the middle of nowhere. And so that's another thing that the NEA has been pointed out. The NEA is supporting things in places like North Dakota, where it would be much harder to get people on the web excited about live performance in North Dakota.
NEA is National Endowment for the Arts, by the way, Carrie.
Cool, yeah, that makes sense.
All right.
Okay, so that's back in the news. Friends of the show, Brooklyn Writer, had their newest, piece or recording or whatever project funded twice over.
That's exciting.
So anyway, The David Lang piano contest that we talked about some weeks ago on the show is complete, and there is a winner.
It's true.
Dave, tell us about it since you posted it.
So David Lang, if you recall, released an album this winter that included a big piano work, and one of the parts of this work, Wed, was made into something of a YouTube contest. He published the score for free on the web, and anybody could get a copy of Wed and record a video of themselves performing it and post it to YouTube and link it to the appropriate account for this contest. And at the end, David Lang picked the person that he thought performed it the best, and they get a trip to New York City to perform it at Le Poisson Rouge.
Le Poisson Rouge, serving art and alcohol. It says on their website.
That's right. So Le Poisson Rouge is a new music nightclub in New York City. It's a pretty hip place, right, Patrick?
Yeah, it's pretty good. The acoustics aren't the best, I gotta say.
Oh,
because
yeah?
it's kind of like it's like a room, like a boxy room kind of thing. So it's not built to really project sound, but the scenery is really, really neat.
So this is a little bit of the winning entry. This is a very simple video. So he
Is
gets
that
to
Johnny Neal? The keyboard player for the Allman Brothers? That's what that guy looks like.
No, that's actually not who that is, and we should
Okay.
say his name. It is. Oh man, no, I've lost it.
Dave, I'm not talking.
Can
And
you
I'm
close the window?
Say what?
I'm on the screen and I'm not the one talking. I'm getting
I'm
there.
looking through here. Oh, Peter Poston, and he's from Texas. He actually lives in Australia now, and he will be coming to New York City to perform this piece. There's also a new four-hand piano work performed by Zelinsky, who's the guy that recorded this piece commercially to begin with, and this prize winner, Peter Poston. And then a new work for piano six hands performed by the three runners-up in the contest.
Interesting.
So I assume these new pieces are by David Lang. This doesn't really specify in this part of the press release, but it should be a fun project. And if you are in New York City, that is occurring Sunday, May 6th.
Cool.
At Le Poisson Rouge. So just a month or two away.
So, intrigue in the world of opera. That's a new one, isn't it? The Opera Orchestra of New York cancels a Verdi performance featuring Placido Domingo because what did they call him?
An anonymous funder.
An anonymous funder withdrew a $250,000 pledge. And that is all we know about it, which makes it seem like you want to imagine there's something really juicy going on, like an episode of Law and Order or something.
Yeah. So, well, the weird thing about this is the plug is pulled on this maybe 2 weeks before the performance, which is kind of stinks. And it was after Placido Domingo had appeared on the Colbert Report, plugging this performance with Stephen Colbert.
Really?
And if you missed this Colbert Report, you absolutely have to go check it out.
Yeah.
At the end of the episode, Stephen comes out and sings
In a
La
tuxedo.
Donne Mobile with Placido Domingo.
Brilliant.
And not without some measure of control.
Right.
My
I
man,
mean,
doesn't do
my
so
man
bad.
gets the job done.
But you know what? He has the white handkerchief and he's like flailing it around.
But he
It's
will
really
get to
great.
say, I sang harmony with Placido Domingo for the rest of his life.
and he's got a little bit of an opera background. Alex Ross had a blog post about this, pointing out some of the things that he had done earlier in his career with opera. So anyway, if you haven't checked that out, do it. But it's kind of a bummer that this isn't going to happen now.
Yeah.
I have another cultural question for Carrie now.
Go for it.
Carrie, do you know who Stephen Colbert is?
No.
He's
I
a
know
late
that
night comedian.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
I know you guys do get like the Daily Show and the.
yeah, we get the Daily Show. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
The
just
Colbert Report comes on right after the Daily Show.
Oh,
It's
okay.
a spin-off featuring one of the former Daily Show correspondents.
Okay.
Right, and it's sort of a special case in that the joke is Stephen Colbert, the host, always pretends that he is a conservative pundit. That is his, and he is very vicious with his guests. Like he will not get out of character, which kind of makes it funny.
yeah.
Sounds brilliant.
So he's very antagonistic towards liberals that come on the show.
Speaking
In
of
a funny-
conservatives, Valery Gergiev, the principal
Oh, yeah.
conductor of the London Symphony Orchestra, has made a campaign video for Vladimir Putin, and he's not the only one. Who's the other big classical musician that's? Is it Anna Netrebko?
Anna Netrebko
Is involved in the Vladimir Putin campaign, and so you can see this video on YouTube. It's funny to me that a classical conductor would be thought of as someone culturally significant enough to have endorsing a political campaign.
Maybe in Russia.
Maybe in Russia. I don't know. I don't think there are any conductors in the United States that I would think of as having that kind of political capital.
At least
I can't imagine a political campaign thinking we need somebody like
MTT.
MTT to Michael Tilson Thomas to endorse this campaign. Or
I can see it having a place in some sort of local political action, but not like
I don't know, man.
presidential campaign.
I think even Gustavo Dudamel would not break the bank.
Even Dudamel,
Even the dude.
the savior of classical
Well, you know
music.
what? I think the dude was in like a Come to California.
That's
Yeah.
true.
That's right.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
He
So,
is.
and it with Arnold Schwarzenegger and
Yeah.
like the whole gang there.
And
so,
Rob Lowe.
Yep.
And all
So
those. Yeah.
You know what he needs to do now, which I vowed that if I ever get famous enough, I'm going to do, is leverage your fame into getting on Iron Chef America. I mean, what more could you ask than to get to eat that food?
I don't know. The fish eyeball ice cream, I think I could do without.
Yeah. So, Dave, I assume you're going to tell us what the significance and all the great things about Maurice
Man,
Andre.
this is a big bummer. I'm a trumpet player. If you don't know that. And Maurice Andre, one of the great trumpet players of the 20th century, passed away this week at age 78. He's the guy who really made playing piccolo trumpet and playing Baroque music on piccolo trumpet a big popular thing. And he's kind of like when you're growing up and you first start to play the high trumpets, the E flat trumpet and the piccolo trumpet. Everybody says, listen to this guy. Listen to Maurice Andre. He's got it nailed. So he's just a brilliant trumpet player. It's very sad to see him go. I don't know if there's any
will
other
be missed.
commentary. He will be missed, and I will listen to his recordings this week in his memory.
The Carrie, I think you posted a story about the Chicago Composers Orchestra. Is that correct?
I'm trying to remember what that was now. I think it was just something about the thing I was talking about earlier about orchestras playing in unusual spaces. Was that right? God, I can't even remember.
Well, I thought it was an interesting. We've talked about the Composers Orchestra on the show before.
Well,
Am
we've
I
talked
correct in
about
that?
the American Composers Orchestra. I don't know if we've talked about the Chicago
yeah.
Composers
Yeah, I
Orchestra.
think I was
This is a
confused about that
relatively
too.
new group.
Yeah.
It's,
Chicago Composers This is, I think, their only their second season.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is very cool that there's more than one of these springing up. But we've talked about the American Composer Orchestras before, and they've been around for a couple of decades at least.
Right. Well, they're in their second season, and according to there's an article that Carrie posted that talks about the kind of atmosphere and how the show went. And you should check out the Chicago Composers Orchestra's website too. It's got a lot of good information. They featured a performance of a bass drum concerto with orchestra by the composer of our pick of the week, and we'll get into that later. But you can watch that. There's a YouTube video of that on, where is it? Is it on the article, or is it? It's on the Chicago Composers Symposium or Composers Orchestra's website somewhere.
So we'll link to that in our show notes because I can't imagine hearing the phrase concerto for bass drum and orchestra and not immediately thinking, I gotta hear this.
Man,
Yeah,
I'm
well, I
intrigued,
listened to
though.
a big chunk of it this morning, and it's nice.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It sounds exciting.
I've always wanted to write a piece for solo subwoofer, and I think
It's kind of the same thing.
It's, yeah, a very similar idea.
Exactly.
It's a very manually operated subwoofer.
exactly right.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a volunteer-based ensemble, and they seem like they're doing good things. So kudos to them, and if you're in the Chicago area, you should definitely check them out.
Great.
How are we doing on time?
We could probably skip a bit.
Well,
Want to jump to the pick?
yeah, we've got the talking article next, which is the portrait of an artist as music critic, which is a big conversation. So I'm saying
Wait, let's bump it.
bump it.
And
Send it-
Majette wrote this fantastic article, and we're going to talk about it next
Yeah.
week, and you should read it. This is one of those
And she-
articles, first of all, that makes me love Ann Majette, but second of all, one of those articles that I just want to print out a bunch of copies of and bring it around and staple it to everybody's head in the College of Music.
Yeah, and it's no mystery that everybody, all the normal regular panelists on the show, have a lot of issues with the way a lot of music critics write.
And I
And
gotta say,
that's-
she brings up Jeremy Dank's recent article in the New Yorker.
Which was brilliant.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
Please buy the New Yorker. Go read. He's a great writer.
So we're going to go over that next week in more detail, but check it out so that you can be an informed participant in the chat online.
That was a teaser.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, pick of the week time.
Pick of the week.
So, our pick of the week this week was recommended to us by our guest, Carrie Andrew. Thank you, Carrie, for bringing this piece to our attention. Do you want to tell
Yeah,
us
why
a
don't
little
you
bit
tell us
about
about
this?
it?
This is Gabriel Prokofiev, the composer of the bass drum concerto we were mentioning earlier. The piece is called Jerk Driver. Do you want to?
Sure.
I guess that
yeah,
deserves a little explanation just from the title alone.
Oh, to be honest, I don't really know the background of the title. You have to get Gabriel on the show. But I think this is the first time that Non-Classical have put out a single as opposed to albums. But it works in the same way, the same format as all of the albums that have come out so far, with like 30 minutes or so of acoustic, interesting contemporary music, and then remixes. So this is a single. It's one part of a larger set of movements for solo cello, played by Peter Gregson, British cellist, written by Gabriel Prokofiev, and this is just a funky movement. And there are lots of remixes afterwards. And I think it's one of the first times they've done a video as well. And I think it's just been recently released, the last couple of weeks or so.
Excellent.
Yeah, and just in case anybody's wondering, Gabriel Prokofiev is the grandson or great-grandson?
I think grandson.
Grandson of that Prokofiev, yes, that guy. He's the grandson of. So.
And I might just say, if there's time, that Gabriel's he's trained as a classical composer, but also at the same time was doing a lot of dance producing and really into electronic music. So even I'm not sure. I'm assuming you're playing the original single rather than a remix.
Well, we're going to play a sample of
cool.
the original and a sample of a remix.
Brilliant.
I think,
Well,
right,
he says about this piece that is influenced by. Do you have grime over there? Grime music, dance music, a certain type of
Yeah,
urban music. Yeah, grime or
it's
sort
kind of
dubstep.
dubsteppy.
Yeah, I guess it's dubstep. Yeah, sort of influenced by some of those sort of beat patterns and stuff in that cello solo.
We have to ask Patrick about anything like that because he lives in New York, where all the
All right,
cool,
yeah.
hip, happening things are.
That's right.
And so we don't know anything about that living out in Michigan.
Mhm.
So
Oh, get the hell out of there.
And I've heard of grime music, whatever.
Take the initiative.
All right,
All right,
hit it,
so-
Dave.
Here's
play
a little, here's
of
a
the
little
main
bit
one.
at the beginning. We're allowed to play about a minute or so. So
Just, yeah,
here's
play,
here's
whatever.
the beginning of the acoustic track "Jerk Driver."
So that was an excerpt from Gabriel Prokofiev's Jerk Driver. That was the original piece, and there are also a couple of remixes. But I think the original piece by itself is already pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you get a chance, listen to it on headphones because there's some pretty awesome hard panning stuff with
Yeah.
with different.
I don't think we're hearing that over Skype.
Skype gets rid of that.
Yeah.
Skype
So
doesn't,
Nate is
doesn't
hearing
like
some
that
cool panning.
complexity.
Yeah.
So play us a remix, Dave.
That's a far cry from Romeo and Juliet 2 generations ago.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
No, but Prokofiev doesn't. I mean, Scythian's sweet. He knows how to rock.
All right.
Well, here, let's go down the list a little
Here's-
bit. This is a clip from DJ Spooky's remix.
Yeah.
Possibly. My internet's a little slow.
Dave.
Dave will edit this in post, right? Oh no!
Oh no! What happened?
My Chrome just died.
Oh crap!
Anyway.
All right.
We'll link to it and. Oh no!
Here we
Dave's
go.
got it.
This is DJ Spooky's remix. All right, so that was a little bit of another remix of the piece that we just listened to.
Yeah. Some of these are pretty great. Let's go on to this.
You want to do another one?
Marcus Lancaster. Mine came back. Here
Oh,
we go.
okay. Hit it.
Little pitch, little stutter. Making beats out of cello samples is like my
I
favorite.
love that. I love the the drum and bass kind of super tight delay that goes.
Yeah.
Yep.
It sounds like he's slouching towards that right there.
Little granular stuff. This
And it's funny because the original piece is a little bit hinting at these same ideas without the electronics.
Yeah,
In it.
it's begging to be remixed.
Right.
I think by design.
Right.
So good job to him.
And the interesting thing about all of the non-classical remixes on all of the albums is that Gabriel just sends all of the remixes, just the original stems, only the original bits of music. You're not allowed to put in anything else. You've got to make all of your beats, everything from those original sounds, whatever they were.
I was wondering about that actually.
Yeah,
That's
really
very
nice
cool.
and organic,
cool.
And a way to make great connections with musicians across multiple domains.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Although it sounds
Awesome.
like he's got a little bit of a background in this himself, which is cool.
Yeah. He certainly used to produce sort of grime artists himself. He might still do that. I don't know. He's another person with many hats for sure.
It seems like that's the thing to do these days.
I think so.
Yeah.
More fun that way.
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely.
It's a lot harder to get burned out when you're doing something new each week.
That's right.
Yes.
Peter Gregson worked in the MIT Media Lab.
Oh, cool.
With the MIT
fine
Media
folks at the MIT Media Lab.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
but,
think.
Do.
Go
I
ahead.
was just say that Peter Gregson, the cellist, and Gabriel and Joby, who's the bass drum player, fantastic percussionist, were all over in the US. They did a bit of a tour, but I'm afraid I don't know exactly where they played. They certainly were in New York, but I don't know if they were in New York.
Probably Boston.
Yeah.
If they were in the U.S., I'm sure they were in New York because that's where all the cool people go in the U.S.
Yeah, they played quite a few gigs, I think. So yeah, Peter Gregson's definitely been in the country recently.
Cool.
All right, so I think we should probably wrap it up. If that's okay. So thank you. First of all, thank you so much for joining us, Carrie. It was really great talking to you today.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Well, you can find the music that we were just listening to and a lot of other things about our show today, all the stories that we talked about, all the links. We'll have links to all of those on our site. You have something
And
you wanna
speaking
add?
of which, Carrie, do you have any events or anything
Oh,
coming
yeah.
up specifically that you'd like to plug before we go?
Well, certainly in the UK.
No,
yeah.
go for it.
I got lots of gigs this next coming week. I'm playing with Metamorphic at the Ritzy and the Vortex. There's this wonderful, speaking of female composers, there's a brilliant thing at the South Bank Centre in London, championing female artists, and I'm involved in that next weekend. And a Dolly Man gig as well. Just go to my website and you'll see all the gigs there.
All
Great.
right. Yes, you have
That's-
quite a list here.
Over at
That's excellent.
carryandrew.net.
carryandrew.net, and we'll have that link as well, along
Thank
with all the stories that we talked about today.
Also, we should point out that Carrie is the first guest on the show that very altruistically nominated a piece not her own for the pick of the week.
I thought about it.
Well, that was kind of like the assumption that we always have, but we're going to make sure, and since you made such an altruistic gesture, we're going to make sure that we link to your SoundCloud and that kind of stuff. She has some really interesting vocal music, and I listen to everything on your SoundCloud, so I'm not just saying that to be nice. Because you can ask everybody else. I don't say things just to be nice.
Sam's actually a jerk,
I'm
so if
honest.
he said nice things, then you should take it
Well,
seriously.
that's why she chose Jerk Driver for the pick of the week.
That's right.
Yeah, Sam would like this.
So we'll also have that link to Carrie's SoundCloud in the show notes. So lots of links today. You should definitely check them out. A lot of interesting stuff, and I know we went through a lot of stories really quickly. So if there was anything that was of particular interest to you that you want to find out some more about, you can find those links on our site, soundnotion.tv/SN. And you can leave us a note there if you have any thoughts on any of the things you heard. You can also connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. We're at SoundNotion on Twitter. This show and all our shows are available in the iTunes store, so be sure to subscribe there for free and catch every episode, download it automatically, and you'll never miss one, which I think is the best way to go.
That's right.
SoundNotion's introduction includes music by our own Patrick Gullo and video by Tyler Lepp. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you back here next week.